The concept of future may function either as a deterrent to progress or as encouragement for increased ecological awareness, as our perception of the future will shape our present actions as we pursue our own interests. This means that the current high levels of emphasis on sustainability may ultimately be self-defeating in their mission. In his piece titled Sustainable Nostalgia, British academic Jeremy Davies argues that humankind naturally and overwhelmingly sees the future through the eye of sustainability, out of a desire to indefinitely maintain the economic, social, and technological status quo. This frame of human thinking can be seen as discouraging innovation, as humans have already begun to see the present way of life as a satisfactory home. Under such a narrow mindset, social mobility is de-emphasized in favor of preserving current rules, environmentalism is skewed in favor of recovering from natural disasters, and potentially life-changing technological advancements are put aside for technology that can make current ways of life infinitely sustainable. This trend towards sustainability, and the dichotomy between the present and the future that it presents, are well illustrated by the opening scenes of the first episode of the TV show The 100. Let's take a look at part of this scene now.
What was that?
That was the atmosphere.
Prisoners of the Ark, hear me now. You've been given a second chance. And as your chancellor, it is my hope that you see this as not just a chance for you, but a chance for all of us. Indeed, for mankind itself. We have no idea what is waiting for you down there.
In this part of the show, the Earth is, by all knowledge, uninhabitable due to past nuclear conflict, and the only known survivors live in a futuristic space station known as the Ark, which is beginning to run out of oxygen. But rather than accepting that the population be forcefully reduced in order to preserve adequate oxygen levels, the leadership instead decides to send 100 delinquents down to Earth, risking their lives to help humanity survive. While this can be viewed as cruelty, it also represents a willingness to avoid sustainability in favor of progress, regardless of the mission's eventual success. In addition, the visual focus on the Chancellor over video conference, as well as the main protagonist in person, shows the fact that this situation is not ideal, that the protagonist is not doing what she'd prefer to do, that there is an element of separation between the pragmatic and humane aspects of this decision, as the person making the decision, the Chancellor himself, is separated from those whom it affects and from the audience. While this scene is a fictional example, it is still applicable to the future. Humans in the future may have to make similar tough decisions, and so the way that fictional characters act is an interesting predictor of how real people will act in similar situations. In this case, the characters chose a quite risky but long-term solution. Rather than trying to indefinitely postpone their problems, these characters instead found a way to have the best of both worlds, to seek advancement for the future without risking their own. While this option may not always be available to humans, it appears that this sort of approach is the most educated, to plan for the future rather than just mitigating the issues of the present, and that's something that future human leaders should take into consideration. This issue is, in a way, well represented by the current climate and energy crisis. Rather than seek to build up clean energy infrastructure and reduce emissions, many current leaders seem to prioritize energy independence and the industries that are worse for the climate, as those who work in these industries feel a risk from societal changes, and countries see energy independence as increasing their own sustainability. President Obama, for example, approved of offshore drilling despite well-studied ecological risks, illustrating his focus on sustainability and an ignorance toward the unknown, stating himself that oil rigs today generally don't cause spills. Within just 3 weeks of this statement, an oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico, leading to the death of over 800,000 birds and the pollution of over 1,000 miles of American coastline from the resulting oil spill. One would assume that after this event, the administration would have learned its lesson and sought to prevent offshore drilling to protect the environment instead. However, government and industry pressure led the Obama administration to allow new offshore drilling permits less than a year after the spill began. Rather than seek environmental justice, leaders like Obama and our current president, who has sworn to protect the coal and fossil fuel industries, instead have sought to maintain the status quo, preventing job loss and prioritizing economic independence, but allowing continued risks to the environment. While this effort to protect these workers and industries, like trying to give enough oxygen to everyone aboard the Ark, is noble and a short-term solution for some, it ultimately will make problems worse. A more radical forward thinking is needed. In order to seriously guarantee an acceptable environment for future generations, we must realize that accepting the status quo does not produce positive outcomes, instead learning to value progress and innovation for the improvement of the world around us. In summary, we must realize that our vision for the future must be for the long term, not the short, and that treating the future as an extension of the present, will only result in the extension of our present doom.